the Nazi who switched sides and helped the Allies win. In the final months of World War II, a senior Nazi officer walked into an Allied intelligence office. He didn't come with his hands up. He didn't come begging for mercy. He came with a briefcase. Inside that briefcase was information that would save thousands of lives, expose some of the most dangerous men in Europe, and help bring down the very regime he had spent years serving. His name was Fritz Kolbe, and he is arguably the most important spy of the entire war. Fritz Kolbe was born in 1900 in Berlin. He was not a soldier, not a general, not a man of violence. He was a diplomat. By the time the Nazi Party rose to power in the 1930s, Kolbe was working inside the German Foreign Office, one of the most sensitive and secretive institutions in the entire Reich. He processed classified cables. He read top-secret communications between Hitler's government and German embassies around the world. He knew things that most people inside the Nazi regime never had access to. And the more he read, the more he hated what he saw. Kolbe had never been a Nazi. He had watched the party rise with growing horror. He had seen what they did to Jewish families in his neighborhood. He had read the classified reports that described atrocities the German public was never allowed to know about. By 1943, Kolbe had made a decision. He was going to betray the Reich. Not for money, not for safety, because he believed it was the right thing to do. The problem was, how? Kolbe was a mid-level diplomat. He had no connections to the Allies, no secret contacts, no training as a spy. He had only one thing: access. In August 1943, Kolbe was assigned to carry a diplomatic pouch from Berlin to the German embassy in Bern, Switzerland. Switzerland was neutral, which meant it was full of spies from every nation on earth. Kolbe knew this was his chance. He arrived in Bern and did something extraordinarily dangerous. He walked into the British intelligence office and offered them everything he had. The British turned him away. They thought he was a plant, a Nazi trap designed to feed false information to Allied intelligence. No one walked in off the street offering secrets. It was too easy, too convenient. Kolbe left the British office with his briefcase still full. He didn't give up. He found another contact, an American, a member of the Office of Strategic Services, the wartime predecessor to the CIA. His name was Alan Dulles. Dulles was skeptical, but something about Kolbe felt different. He agreed to look at what was in the briefcase. What he found shocked him. Kolbe had brought 186 classified German diplomatic cables, real ones, verified, containing information about German military movements, agent networks, planned operations, and the internal communications of some of the highest officials in the Nazi government. Dulles sent the documents to Washington for verification. The response came back quickly. They were real. Every single one. Kolbe became the most valuable intelligence source the Allies had in Europe. Over the course of the next 2 years, he made multiple trips to Bern. Each time, he brought more documents. By the end of the war, Fritz Kolbe had delivered over 1,600 classified German documents to American intelligence. He revealed the identities of German agents operating inside Allied countries. He exposed planned military operations before they happened. He gave the Allies insight into Hitler's strategic thinking at the highest level. Alan Dulles later said that Kolbe was the best source of intelligence the OSS had during the entire war, that the information he provided saved an incalculable number of lives. But here's the part of the story that most people never hear. After the war ended, Fritz Kolbe expected recognition. He had risked his life. He had betrayed his country for the right reasons. He had helped end one of the most evil regimes in human history. Instead, he was treated with suspicion. In post-war Germany, being known as someone who had worked against the Reich, even against the Nazis, carried a social stigma. Many Germans who had simply followed orders were quietly reintegrated into society. But men like Kolbe, who had actively worked against Germany, were viewed by some as traitors. He struggled to find work. He was denied a pension. The American government, which had used his intelligence so effectively, did little to help him publicly. The Cold War had begun, and many former Nazi officials were now being quietly recruited by Western intelligence agencies. Acknowledging Kolbe too loudly would have created uncomfortable questions. Fritz Kolbe spent the rest of his life in relative obscurity. He worked as a coffee salesman, a man who had delivered 1,600 classified Nazi documents to the Allies, selling coffee. He died in 1971. For decades, his name was almost completely unknown outside of intelligence circles. It was only in the 1990s, when classified OSS files were finally declassified, that the full picture of what Fritz Kolbe had done became clear. Alan Dulles, who had gone on to become the first civilian director of the CIA, had written about Kolbe in private documents. He called him the man who did more than any other single individual to shorten the war in Europe. Not a general, not a soldier, not a politician, a diplomat with a briefcase. A man who walked into an enemy intelligence office because he believed that some things mattered more than loyalty to a flag. There is something deeply uncomfortable about Fritz Kolbe's story. We like our heroes to be rewarded. We like to believe that doing the right thing leads to recognition and safety and a good life. Kolbe did the right thing, and he spent the rest of his life selling coffee. But the 1,600 documents in that briefcase, the cables he risked everything to carry across a border, helped end a war that was consuming the world. Maybe that has to be enough. Fritz Kolbe, the Nazi who wasn't really a Nazi, the spy who was never supposed to exist, the man history almost forgot completely. If you want more stories like this, the ones that were buried for decades in classified files, subscribe, because there are files that were never meant to be opened.